On the 4th of March, the House of Keys will choose 4 people to become members of the Legislative Council. Prior to that vote, Agenda and Perspective will be speaking with all the candidates so that you can find out more about the people that hope to become national politicians. We hear this week from businessman Ron Berry. Ron joins me now in the studio.
Well, my name's Ron Berry, obviously. I'm not Manx born. I'm a Mancunian, but my mother had a great love for the Isle of Man, and she used to bring us over to the island about twice a year from being a baby. And we came over once when I was 9 years of age, and she left me here. She bought a business on Prospect Hill, a sweet shop that she ran for nearly 20 years. I was enrolled in Domain Road School, and then so I consider myself Manx, really. This is my home. After college, I had a fairly varied early career in the wine trade, working for Hen and Brearley's, and then working in Yorkshire for Gilby Vintners, also in Australia for Gilby Vintners. I came back to the island and I trained as a psychiatric nurse, and then after that got into broadcasting. Went to Australia again after I got married, and then came back and started my own business. In 1990, I started a company called The Agency. The agency was started off as an advertising agency, but developed over nearly 20 years into a full-service advertising, design, promotions agency with a lot of blue-chip clients. I grew the business from a standing start up to $1.5 million turnover. Barclays Bank, a lot of government, different sort of divisions of government were clients. I did Swiss roadshows for 9 years with a client, with a corporate service provider, promoting the Isle of Man. And I suppose our biggest job was rebranding Manx Airlines prior to the sale along with British Midland. So that was it. I've always loved broadcasting, and I worked in radio. I started with Manx Radio in 1984. And carried on working with Manx Radio right through till going to Australia in 1987. Coming back, worked for another year, and then started the agency. In 2006, I sold the agency. I worked for 4 years inside government and was one of 5 investors that started 3FM. And took over 3FM as the majority shareholder in 2011, and grew 3FM from just a music radio station into a multimedia business. So that's it. And I sold the 3FM in 2022 and stayed on as chairman until September 23. And since then, I've been working just a little bit of concierge work, helping people relocate to the Isle of Man. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, a large nutshell, but yes, very good. So I suppose then the obvious question, you've been around, you understand how politics works in the Isle of Man. Why on earth would you want to be a member of the Legislative Council?
Do you know, I've always had a sort of an interest in local politics. It's always been something that I've lived very close to it, and I think we all live very close to local politics. So it's something that I've had a more than just a passing interest in. I did stand for the Keys actually when I'd sold the agency against David Cannon in 2007, and did very little in terms of sort of being out on the doorstep. Miles Walker was very good. He actually told me how to run a campaign, and I didn't take any notice of it, and ended up with 25% of the vote. But I didn't live in the constituency. We had lived in Glenwillan for about 7 years at one point, but I didn't live there when I stood in the Keys. But I learned an awful lot about the process. LegCo is something that I think I looked at last time there was a LegCo election. And I was too involved in radio. I was too involved in the whole 3FM thing at the time. And now I find myself with a lot more time to actually dedicate to a project, to something, and giving back. The island's been very good to me in terms of my businesses and being able to sort of enjoy a very active working life on the island. And I think we all have a duty to, if we're in a position to put something back into the community and for the good governance of the island. So that's my main motivation.
And in terms then, I mean, obviously your skill sets you've described to a fashion. How do your experiences help you when you are engaged as a member of the Legislative Council in fulfilling the various functions you would have? What are the things that you think you can bring to the table there?
Running small businesses and starting small businesses, I think you get a great understanding of really what's required. You have to multitask. You have to be a business owner. You have to be a HR. You have to be as an employer. You are tasks with making sure the business runs. You have to understand accounts, economy. You have to understand marketing. There's a very, very broad brushstroke to running your own business. I've been fortunate enough to start more than one business, and 26 years ago started a business with my wife which still runs the Spill the Beans coffee shop. Nice plug there. So I understand, I suppose from a small business level, what it takes effectively. One of the things that I think is very important in LegCo is the ability to be able to understand detail and fulfill that sort of role where you have if you like, a more, not more objective, but a different viewpoint from perhaps maybe what the members of the House of Keys get wrapped up in when they're bringing legislation through.
So imagine then, 3 weeks' time, you're a member of the Legislative Council, you've been successful, and you are presented with your first bill to scrutinise. What are the things that you are going to look for?
Well, I think there's a lot of reading involved. Obviously, there's a lot of understanding there. But I think mainly what you have to look at is it good law? Is it necessary? Is it effective? Is it clear? Is it coherent? Is it accessible? Is it fair? Is it easily understood? I think all of those things are very important. You will hear interviewing the candidates for LegCo the word scrutiny a lot. And I think scrutiny in this context means that it's an enhancement of the technical quality of legislation. I think that's very important. I think there's also a very important function that LegCo can fulfill between LegCo members and Keys members. It's very much a fostering of a collaborative working relationship with the members of the House of Keys.
And sometimes the members of the House of Keys will collectively do something that you think is a bit of a policy aberration. Again, if you are successful and you're in LegCo and this happens, what do you do about that?
Well, you have to stand up and be counted. I think that's important. You can't be frightened of actually sort of voicing any concerns that you might have. That's part and parcel of good law. In theory, good procedure will result in good legislation. Bad procedure risks the enactment of bad legislation. So, as a LegCo member, one has to understand that if you are making a point, that point has to be made in a very clear and concise way, and understand why you're making that point. I've never run shy of picking a phone up and talking to somebody. I think you get more done that way than you do sort of perhaps voicing concerns in a public arena.
We often hear from Keys and occasionally LegCo members that, they're just one of many, and how can they possibly manage to do anything individually when they need to be there as the collective? Well, first of all, how do you influence the collective? And secondly, is it right that as an individual politician you can't achieve much?
I think you can, and I think if you're going to go to have an effective or make effective change, you can do it from within, and that's often better. I think when we sit outside of politics, and there are so many experts out there, and I've included myself in that category from time to time. When you think, oh God, that's stupid. but a little bit of information, information doesn't necessarily give you a full understanding. So you have to really be in a position where you can find out more, find out what reasons are being put forward for various things that happen. So I think you can understand more from the inside than you can from the outside, and I also think that effective and good communication is probably the best route to understanding.
So the other element there's various elements to being a member of LegCo. One of the elements, perhaps that's a better way of putting it, is if you are successful, the evening that you are successful, you will have lots of ministers trying to woo you to get you to join their department. Where do you stand on MLCs being departmental members?
That's an interesting question, Phil, really. I mean, if you look at the function of LegCo, it's been around since medieval times. And it's changed. It's over those years, it has to change. And it's had to adapt. But it's still there, and it still plays an important part of what the political process has to bring to the table. I think anyone is going to say to you, yes, of course, wherever I feel as though, or it's felt that I can be useful, of course. But I think, then that makes the job description, a very broad job description. So it's not just sitting in Legislative Council scrutinising legislation. It then becomes a broader brushstroke in terms of what you get involved in departments. And I think the important thing is to understand going into that is that it's really one as a non-executive role. I'm not sure about MLCs having the decision-making process in departments, but certainly as a non-executive, putting the wealth of experience that people have into the right areas is an important contribution.
And you are perhaps a rare thing in as much as you have experienced life both outside and inside of government. I guess in your various business roles you have been in contact with government, sometimes in a frustrating fashion, I guess, sometimes more successful. What is wrong with government? Or perhaps you think government's absolutely fine.
It's we have a constitution here. We have a government framework that, in its pure makeup, is quite an interesting one. I read with interest the Lord Lesvain report, and his comments were quite striking in the respect that he was quite complimentary in many respects about our structure here. We have to have, although we're a small population, we have to have, by the nature of our constitution, a government size that would be fit for purpose for a population of 8 million, let alone 85,000. And that's not because we want to have that size government. It's the way our constitution is structured and our position within the world. One can argue that it's too big. I think that any useful democracy, any good democracy anywhere in the world should, from time to time, scrutinise itself or be scrutinised and ensure that it's actually fit for purpose. So, I think government has been scrutinised, reports have been made. I think sometimes we should take more notice of what those consultants are saying. But we're doing okay.
And I guess the other thing that you will be familiar with is where the obstacles to progress are. Government has famously introduced its Our Island plan, and it has many objectives, many of which are still to be achieved. What are the obstacles to success as far as you can see in terms of how you go from a great policy idea to the policy idea being implemented?
I think there's an old saying that you can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs, and I think what that means really is that you've got to take chances in order to get somewhere. I think sometimes our processes can hamper progression. I think there are lots and lots of great opportunities that we have on the island that perhaps are overlooked because of regulation. I don't see regulation is a bad thing. Over-regulation can hamper growth and stifle opportunity. So I think, we used to have this freedom to flourish strapline within government. I think we need to sort of look backwards in order to progress forwards. And Winston Churchill said, in order to progress forwards, you've got to look to the past. And I think that's a good philosophy. Look at what we've done in the past that was great, and see how we can implement that, wrap it up in a new jacket, and implement it today.
And you mentioned there freedom to flourish. I mean, it's fair to say that strapline had its critics, but I guess the principle, were it to be delivered, is a sound one. Absolutely.
And the island plan, the principles of the island plan, I don't think anybody could object to those at all. I think it would be nice to see a bit more strategy in there, rather than sort of, if you like, this is what we want to do. It's how we're going to get there, and how do we measure that success.
And I suppose then in your experience, is the way in which the civil service is constructed fit for purpose? Is it good at taking those ideas and then creating work plans to actually deliver?
I think as it stands at the moment, and the way the economy is and the challenges that the island faces in a very uncertain world, I think what we have to do now is look to efficiencies. Efficiencies are very important. How can we do things better? Does government have to have so many fingers in so many pies? Government should be a facilitator. That's really the role of government, to facilitate, but also, to deliver public services, to make sure that the vulnerable are not taken advantage of, and make sure that economic growth is good, make sure our health services in good order, make sure it's a safe place to be. And we tick the box in an awful lot of those areas. But I think there is room for improvement, without a doubt.
So, there's a few big ticket items that the government has identified in our island plan. Housing was probably the key issue when it came to the last general election for the House of Keys. Do you think the progress that's been made is significant, or is it enough? Would you say that there will still be lots of people wondering how are they going to afford a house on the island?
Do you know, I've got first-hand experience of this. I've got two daughters. One lives off the island, and the other one came back to the island, thankfully, after university, and her and her boyfriend have just bought a house. And it's been difficult for them. It has been hard. But, when I actually look at some of the development that has been undertaken over the last few years, some of the developments have been quite amazing. When you look at how Ballasalla has developed, when you look at how Peel has developed, those areas have grown, and houses become more accessible. I don't know whether it becomes affordable housing. I don't know whether you were talking about public housing, but certainly from the point of view, as our population grows, and we want to grow our population, then I think we need to sort of enhance that development quicker. I think we need to be more fleet of foot with the planning process in order to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our population.
I guess that many people in business would argue that if there's a gap in the market, businesses will fill it. Why is that not happening then, perhaps, or maybe it is happening in terms of housing? I don't know.
I think it is. I think, there's one or two building companies that have really sort of made a big difference to the island. I think if you were to go back in time to the 60s and late 60s, early 70s, and had a look at what our island looked like then to what it looks like now, it's kind of unrecognisable, really, in a good way. I think in a good way. Okay,
so 16 candidates have got through to the ballot paper. You're one, and you're wanting one of the 4 seats available. So the odds are not in your favour, in as much as 16 into 4 doesn't go. What would you be saying to an MHK who was pondering the difficult question as to who they were going to pick for an MLC?
Well, I guess we're going to find out at the hustings, really. That's going to be the telling time on how one performs at the hustings in answering the questions that are put forward. There's a lot of great candidates there. I've looked at all the CVs. I've looked at all the people that have managed to get through to the husting stage, and there's some tough competition, without a doubt. I think a lot, from my point of view, some of my experiences have not been as great or as enormous as some of the candidates. But I think, from my point of view, I do bring a passion for the Isle of Man. I do bring experience in small business on the island. I do understand the challenges of bringing up a family here. I understand the challenges of running a business here and making it work, and the challenges of employing people. All of those things at a local level, I think make a contribution to the progression of the island. When you've got that experience on a national and international level, I think it brings a different dynamic. And so both things are important, but from my point of view, it's very locally focused.
The Treasury Minister has found, perhaps in the last week or so, that there are often with politics lots of unpalatable answers, and you've got to pick one of them. This is particularly in relation to pensions, I'm thinking at the moment. How do you go about making an unpalatable answer, or explaining an unpalatable answer to the public?
Well, I said earlier on, I think communication is key. Even from my time working inside government, I recognise quite clearly that communication, both inside and outside of government, is not good. The word I used was appalling. So I think communication is key to a lot of understanding a lot of the decisions that have to be made. So I would personally improve communication, improve it greatly how those the process that those decisions are arrived at.
And does that work also in relation to Tynwald? Because effectively government has a comms team, but Tynwald doesn't have a comms team, I suppose, because Tynwald is not it's a collection of individuals. It doesn't speak with one voice in quite the same way as government.
It's, when you've got 24 individuals who all have their own ideas, I think it's to get them all on the same page. Communication is a very important part of that. My own experiences have found that some individuals are very hard to get hold of and get them to communicate. It is quite difficult from time to time. So I think that's what makes cohesive government, is good communication.
Well, good luck with your candidacy.
Thank you, Phil, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to me.
That was businessman Ron Berry. While you don't have a vote, I hope you're finding it interesting listening to those who wish to represent us all in Tynwald. I'm sure your MHKs would be interested in hearing who you'd favour in the LegCo vote, even though you don't get to vote. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. I'm Phil Gorn. Go to Myos and Geistach Rom. Thanks for listening.